We may be live. It appears that we are live, which is what we want. All right. Hello, everybody. This is the War of Ideas voice chat on the Pangburn Discord channel. You can find the link to that down in the description. Today, we are going to be discussing Columbus Day. Now, I must admit the title is a bit of a clickbait, as I do not actually hold that position, which is why there are question marks. But generally, the topic is the moral standing of Christopher Columbus and the expansion of the West in general, the moral implications of that, how we should properly look at it, and all things of that nature. So, I'm planning on playing devil's advocate with whatever everybody else says, as per our usual arrangement, and it should be a great conversation. So I want to open it up to Doolittle. I'll let you take first stab at it, and then we'll hop over to the others. What do you think about Christopher Columbus? Sure. Was he a good person? Should we still have the day? If we shouldn't have the day, should we replace it? Like, give me your hot takes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the claim that Christopher Columbus did nothing wrong is probably overly broad, and it would be pretty hard to defend that, because I'm sure he's done something wrong.
Yes, I believe that as well. I think it's for the algorithm largely. But yes, yeah, it's a bit. I will admit to my clickbaitiness.
Yeah, hopefully we get a couple people in here to talk about it. I mean, I think that the effort to to sail west to get to India or wherever it was that he was trying to get to establish new trade routes, I think that's extremely brave. And though he underestimated the diameter of the Earth, he was one of the first people that risked, or at least aside from Vikings, I guess, that risked going against the what was, I guess, the modern at the time interpretation of the shape of the Earth, and people being afraid you're going to get eaten by sea monsters or falling off, or he took a huge risk to put his money where his mouth was, and I think it paid off historically. Allowing Europe to find the Western world in a more permanent manner than obviously the Vikings were here before he was, but they didn't really get much of a foothold, and they were what they did was more. It seems like it was more temporary, and
yeah, I kind of forgot
went back.
about it.
I guess they went back when it got cold. I guess after a certain period of time, and they weren't really trying to unify the globe, I guess. Seems like Columbus was trying to get everyone knew those trade routes were valuable, and he was going after closing that distance, and at serious personal risk. And so I think he deserves a lot of respect for making that play.
Sure. Anyone have a counter to that in our peanut gallery here? Dalsu, Zemo? Any of you want to take a stab at it? What you think about Columbus overall? Do you agree with Doolittle? Disagree? Yeah, Dalsu, go ahead.
I think I agree with what Doolittle said. He discovered. I disagree overall with I don't really like Columbus, and I don't really think he should have a holiday. But I do think he discovered the Americas for late Renaissance Europe, or early Enlightenment, I guess, depending on how you want to look at it. But he basically went on 3 or 4 trips there, and created a bunch of the rumors about gold being in the Americas, and so that he could go back and continue looking for riches. But all he really found was slaves, and then he sent those to the Queen of Spain, and I guess she was super against slavery. So he got in trouble, and then there was a revolt or something, and eventually he got arrested and taken back to Spain in chains, and lost his noble titles. I don't think even in the moment he was considered good, respect-worthy person after that.
Yeah. You said you didn't like the holiday though. Would you want to replace it? Do you think, or would you think we just get rid of it altogether? What do you think about like Indigenous Peoples Day, like replacing it?
I mean, I think it's fine as a sort of apology to, but for the most part, like, I think I do agree that with the sentiment that Columbus has been overly emphasized. As far as changing the holidays, I don't think it's necessary. Like you could just because you would be pissing off a bunch of people just to rectify with a bunch of other people. But I do think Native Peoples Day or month or whatever wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Mm. Jolly Lub, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but you seem like a new face. What do you think about Columbus and Columbus Day and all that jazz?
I'm actually from Australia, so I've got no idea what the hell that is.
Oh, Columbus Day? All right, well, prepare for an education.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, Christopher Columbus was a voyager back in the 1400s, and he was not the first one to get to America, but he essentially brought the Western world to the Americas, and in doing so, a lot of indigenous people died of both disease and general violent conquest. And we have a holiday celebrating him because we like the fact that the Americas got discovered, but now it's not so simple. Zima, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with what Doolittle said about, he was risking life and limb and all these such things to come here. I agree with Dow. He wasn't well liked even among his contemporaries. People around him, even for his time, thought that he was pretty barbaric. But I'll be the first to say I don't really know that much. Like, I don't know the in-depth history of Columbus. As far as the day, I mean, this kind of goes to the whole statue, Memorial Day and naming people after our forefathers in general, I guess. Like, I just wanted people to remember why we name things after people. We don't name it after them to condone the wrong things that they did. We don't have a Columbus Day because he murdered a bunch of people or gave them a bunch of European diseases of which they had no immunity. We celebrate him because he, for all intents and purposes, discovered this land. And, I think that's important just to keep in context in general. But, if the day were taken away, I wouldn't really care. If it stayed, I wouldn't really care. I think it's just good to know your history. And I think one of the most interesting things in history period is the Columbian Exchange, which actually came from this. So the fact that they had, horses weren't indigenous to this part of the world, and all these other fruits and vegetables and animals that we take for granted, they were on totally different continents.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting little side note if anybody wants to look into that. So, those are just my general thoughts here.
Right. Well, you make a good point that I figured we'd branch into at some point, and it doesn't mean we'll do it now. But the whole should we idolize history is a debate that's been had very recently, and I've always come down on the idea that exactly what you said, evil and wrongdoing in our standards is exceedingly common throughout history. It's exceedingly common now, and to pretend like we remember and put up these historical figures in regards to their evil is absurd because it's common. What we're putting them up for is for their bravery, like what you said. And I've always thought that Columbus was more of a Jefferson figure than a Robert E. Lee kind of figure. Is how I've always thought of him personally.
Yeah.
He didn't do great things, but he wasn't better or worse than anyone at the time, really. And he did a lot of stuff that was really helpful for just the development of the West and just this society on the globe in general. It's Daniel. I'm not sure I really recognize your name. I want to get your take on this. And if you're in general agreement, I'll start playing devil's advocate. And if you're not, then we can get a little bit of a debate going. It's Daniel. You're up. All right, you've unmuted. The next step is to talk and tell us what you think. I'm in suspense here. Going once, going twice. Sold, but not to you. All right, we'll come back to you. Okay, so here's one that I hear a lot. What do you guys think about the claim that, how do I put this? I'm trying to steelman people who really, really hate Columbus. That Columbus was basically a genocidal maniac and therefore deserves no respect regardless of where he committed his atrocities. And that it probably would have been discovered by some explorer at some point anyway. Would anyone have a challenge to that or what?
I think imperialism in its. Sorry, is someone else going? Or?
No, go ahead, man. Hit me.
Yeah, well, for me as a Marxist, any kind of imperialism is just shit. It's just wrong. So from a basic presupposition of that, I would say anyone that took forward imperial conquests isn't. I mean, you can say it was in context of time and whatnot, but we don't have to respect that now if we have a different set of moral presuppositions. So it's I would say from my perspective, anything that has to do with imperialism is definitionally bad.
I mean,
descriptively.
I'd like to respond. So
yeah, sure.
I just generally think it's very silly and ill-advised to judge people of yesteryear by today's morality. Especially if you can go back 10 years and judge somebody's old tweets. What are you going to do hundreds of years ago? And I mean, as far as imperialism being a presuppositional bad, I mean, what if he came here and there were no people? I mean, humans have exploratory. Well, I mean, did he know that there were going to be people that he was going to kill before he set sail? I mean,
well, he could have gone back, I suppose. I mean, coming somewhere and like let's say if I went into somebody's house and thought it was uninhabited, and then I saw a light flicker on and go, oh gee, there's someone here, I better shoot him dead and then take over the house. I think that is what I'm talking about. So the distance traveled doesn't really matter. And the point is that should we celebrate a day of a figure that did something back in the day that doesn't correlate with our current morality? That's the question. I mean, if we celebrate someone, we also judge someone too.
Yeah, we'd have to eliminate pretty much all historical figures.
Yep.
So.
Yep. That's no problem.
Well, you're a Marxist, so that.
Yeah, that tracks actually. But I don't think you have to be a Marxist to make your argument.
I admire the consistency.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The interesting thing is I don't think you have to be a Marxist to make that argument.
Ground here.
Oh, go ahead, Deltsu. Sorry. I think I talked over someone. Deltsu, go ahead. Whatever you were saying.
Sorry, I think so. I think you picked up someone else in the background.
Okay. Doolittle, you have something? I see a flickering over there.
No.
Okay. Well then, I had a response. So I generally think that holding up getting rid of all historical figures as having any good attributes is probably not the best idea. But I also don't think you really have to be a Marxist to make this argument. I think a lot of people are making this argument right now that basically all people historically don't stand up to our personal moral values at this very moment, and therefore we shouldn't respect any of them. And to me, this feels just exceedingly dangerous, as it essentially unmoors us from history and reality. And I understand that's a very vague argument, but it just seems exceedingly dangerous to say everybody who's ever lived so far was a horrible person. We're the only people who know better, and we should start from that assumption and move forward. So, would you guys...
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, please. I might be strawmanning your argument, but I want to hear what you think about that.
Yeah.
Not trying
to.
to.
I think, like look, if you look at something like, let's say an empirical figure, like that's what I was sort of relating to. I mean, there's plenty of philosophers that have existed,
Sure.
giants in terms of intellectualism, people who haven't harmed anyone from any perspective. I mean, you can't say from, let's say, today's metrics, someone like Gandhi or Buddha or even Jesus, for example. Like if you look at they're completely kosher by even today's standards. So respecting those guys, as even today from our contemporary moral standings, isn't, it's not throwing everybody in the under the bus from a historical perspective, but there are certain people that did certain things which I think, even by its own standards, I mean, I think we overstep the boundary when we say everyone in the history was barbaric. That's just not true. There are other cultures who are relatively less barbaric. They were relatively less, I guess, what's the word? I mean, violent, imperial, whatever you want to call it. So there are plenty of more peaceful cultures, people who are touched with the land and nature, and did less damage to the greater cause. And I think they're worthy of respect. So let's say the Wiccan culture in Europe, for example. I mean, that you cannot level a criticism against that versus, say, the Spanish imperialists or the Dutch imperialists or the English imperialists of later days. The Roman Empire. There's plenty of kingdoms that probably were destroyed because they were too peaceful or didn't put up enough of a resistance. So, I don't think it's fair to say that everybody in history had equal, I guess, negative traits, or what we would consider traits worthy and unworthy of respect. So, yeah, I don't think it's a flat line across the board. I don't buy into that Christian thing. The smallest sin is equal to the Holocaust kind of thing. Like every problem, every vice in humanity is equally worthy of critique. I don't buy that. I think there's a sliding scale where there's some people are better than others, or some cultures are better than others, and someone might have screwed up a little bit, but someone like Hitler and your guy down the road that stole from the bank, they're not the same thing in my book.
Right.
So,
what do you think about replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day? Because you see.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
And then we'll get to our new guy. You're okay, Alab. Your little just has background. Jolly.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Go ahead, Dalsu. Sorry.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think there are examples of people who weren't the best person that we can still look to as having some quality that was good. We just shouldn't. I think we shouldn't focus. We should focus on the morality of the people at the time and the atrocities that happen more, especially if we're teaching about these sorts of things. I don't know if having a holiday to celebrate Christopher Columbus is the best thing. I don't think there's a reason to venerate Christopher Columbus over someone like Amerigo Vespucci, who really arguably did more of the discovery than Columbus ever did. But at the same time, I would say someone like Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, they had slaves and they did bad things, but they also set up the foundation for something we have now that we've built upon, so that there is kind of an importance to some of these people. But I do think someone like Columbus just is not one of those people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean.
All right, great. It seems like
it's
go.
I wouldn't claim that everyone in history is just bad because they clearly didn't have the same moral framework as we did. I mean, I don't even buy into that because I'm not a moral objectivist, or I don't believe in any kind of objective morality at all. So I would be the first one to not say that there's any moral grounding that we're basing any of these decisions on. They're fluid, as they all are. But coming from, if somebody today lived a life like Columbus, I'm not sure we'd be celebrating them. So I don't think we need to celebrate anyone in history just because from their perspective things were okay. I mean, that would almost justify every single person in the Second World War, because the whole world was literally at war, and people killing either their citizens or, like if you want to take the Allies, they were exterminating most of the people in the Commonwealth or their empires or whatever. We don't need to really build up anybody as a hero in that sense, in my opinion.
I'm sorry, you said so you don't even though you agree that there's a sliding scale of morality for historical figures, you don't think any historical figures should be held up as heroes? Like
No, plenty should be plenty.
Okay, sorry, I heard something else. Sorry.
I was just saying we shouldn't make excuses from let's say Hitler was around when the world, during a time of great depravity, economically speaking, the world was trying to conquer. The nation states were trying to conquer one another. Therefore, Hitler just did what others were trying to do to the Jews. There's plenty of those apologetics going on. He was just the guy that got caught doing the thing that the Middle East wanted to do, or the Soviets wanted to do, or the Jews weren't loved anywhere else in the world either. They wanted to, it's just Hitler was the one that got caught doing it, kind of thing. He was the guy. But that doesn't mean you have to excuse it, just because other people at the time were not exactly pro-Semitic, doesn't mean we got to go, well, yeah, he belonged to an anti-Semitic world, so that's okay. He's just one of the guys that did what everyone else wanted to do. That's, from my perspective, bullshit.
I mean, there's a big Hitler difference. There's a big difference between Hitler and Columbus. Hitler is a loser.
That's right, exactly.
And he didn't create essentially, part of the foundation of the society that we live in today, other than just being a bad example. And Columbus,
Right. I would say I think you actually were right in what you said first. I think winners write history, so he was a loser in history, so therefore he's not. I think there's plenty of guys in history that were equal losers as him in terms of their character or their moral standing. But it's because I would say that a la the British Empire, which sort of is the British culture, I would say that is the mainstay around the world, especially the Western world or the modern world. English is the global language, for example. America's and England and the West usually are the stakeholders for what is right and wrong from a global perspective in writing human rights and all that. They're the by far the greatest partisans to what is deemed as humane, moral, liberal, good, free, whatever. All these conditions have been laid out by a certain group of people, and they were historically the winners post Second World War. So I wouldn't say that's a moral claim to good or bad. I think it's just winners wrote the history, and they wrote themselves as the good guys, as they usually do.
Well, is it a virtue to explore and discover new territory?
From our perspective, yes, because we, that's how we came into being. Or I'm talking as we.
Right? Is it a virtue to be a pioneer? I think the answer is yes. Oh, sorry. Are you still?
Yeah, I was just saying from our perspective, yes, because we hold virtues on certain things that how America or the most Western nations wouldn't have become colonized or English. They like to call them the English-speaking world largely, or the French-speaking world. Wouldn't have been possible without the colonization. So to justify our own existence, we have to say that that's a virtuous thing. So I mean, that doesn't really go, doesn't really justify or do anything in propagating any of our positions. That's how we came into being, and if we were to deny that, that would not justify our being. Therefore, it's good. So from a pragmatic perspective, we'd have to say yes, it's a good thing.
Right? Yeah.
That doesn't auto mean.
Yeah. There's a couple new people in here. I just want to give it a chance for them to grab the mic, and if not, I do have a response. I'm gonna give It's Daniel one more shot. You hopped in and out, so I know there's someone behind that, behind your icon. What do you think about Columbus Day? Do you think it should be gotten rid of? Do you think he's a good guy, bad guy? Give us your thoughts.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was on my computer and the mic was simply not connecting, so I had to switch to my phone. Okay,
We're good now.
With regards to the Columbus Day issue, I think for the most part Columbus is still celebrated because he essentially discovered America and basically sparked the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in a sense, because the discovery of America is what eventually led to globalization, basically, and improved trade routes and and that connection is what sparked the beginning of the Western civilization as we know it, essentially, right? So I think for the most part, that's why he's celebrated, not necessarily because of, we tend not to acknowledge the vices that he had or the evils that he did as he was, trying to conquer the Americas for, was it Spain or Portugal? I forget. But yeah, I don't, in today's society, whether he should be celebrated as a hero based on like the evils he did overall, comparing it to what we hold as, good and heroic in today's world, I don't think he should be celebrated today because he wasn't that great a guy in history to be celebrated today.
Can I
Please.
just say something? It
Please.
was Spain. The guy he tried Portugal, but Portugal already knew there was a continent there, so they sent him to Spain. I just wanted to say that it's a bit weird how politicized. I come late. I don't know if you guys. I assume you guys are having an organized discussion about if this guy should be or not, right? If the thing should be commemorated or not in the United States.
Yeah, that's basically the topic. Is basically Columbus's moral standing and how that relates to whether he should be celebrated, how we should consider history overall. And the only organization is me moderating, so feel free to cut loose.
All right. Okay, so I just wanted to say that I feel like maybe morality or what this guy was as a person doesn't really have anything to do with commemorating that someone got there first, right? And a lot of people think that and thought until very recently that was meaningful, that the United States began, quote unquote, right? I know it didn't begin, right? But this guy sort of found out the land from the western side that would then become the United States of America. So I think in a way that's what's being celebrated, and not necessarily the person and his moral intellectuality, which, by the way, doesn't make any sense to judge from our point of view with either. I think that's another thing that often gets looked over, that it's easy to judge the past, right, from the future's morality standpoint.
I think that's right, and I think it really does raise an interesting question of whether we can separate the historical men from their deeds. And like exactly what you said, like when we celebrate Columbus Day, we don't necessarily like celebrate like Christopher Columbus's moral character the same way we'd celebrate like Mother Teresa, for example, who is generally celebrated solely because of her morality. Theoretically, we celebrate Columbus because of what he did, and he did do a lot of bad things because, like Jolly B said, imperialism, violent conquest was kind of the name of the game. But we celebrate him for the good things he did. And I guess it's a real question whether you can delineate between different things when you're celebrating a man.
Can I come in here in that sense?
Can
I come in here? Just
yeah, please.
So when we talk about historical figures, us not being able to judge certain figures in history for what they're for what they did. I mean, we actually do that. I mean, I think even to, like as a Marxist, for example, when I come forward in most discussions that are hosted in the Western sort of Discord servers, often they're met by criticism. Oh, look what the Soviets did. Look how that failed. Look at Stalin. I mean, we can't really. We pick and choose our enemies, and we don't give them any. Yeah, or we don't give him that same courtesy. We don't go, oh, well, Hitler, he was just a product of his time. We can absolutely, unequivocally use him as the bad guy. I mean, there's no philosophical discussion that lasts for more than 3 hours where he's not mentioned as some kind of flag bearer for evil. I mean, no one gives him that credibility of, hey, well, he was a guy that was living around, the Prussian Empire at a certain point in time in history, and this was the general feeling of Germany, or the area that used to occupy what is now Germany back in the day, and well, you know, like you have to give him some kind of, I don't know, get out of jail card, because he was just a product of his circumstances, or circumstances of the land that he was occupying. So we cherry pick those things, you know. We go, oh, well, Columbus, oh no worries, you know, it's okay. Well, it's fine that he did what he did in that specific period of history, but that if that was applied across the board, we wouldn't even have a moral fabric to celebrate somebody as a hero, and then not celebrate and you know, denounce someone as a villain like we do with Stalin, Hitler, you know, the quote unquote the bad guys of history, you know, like, and that's so history. If it's going to be used as a moral fabric, you know, we don't want to be like the guys that did X, Y, Z, and we want to be more like the guys that did X, Y, Z. Like, it's then you got to have that duality in a sense, and you can only measure that by, you know, their moral actions, I think.
Yeah, but
what else is there to judge them by?
I think the difference is that Hitler had, like, if you're gonna make these comparisons between Columbus and Hitler, like, the reason we don't celebrate Hitler is because he had no redeeming qualities or deeds, like none that even remotely outweighed all the bad he did. But Christopher Columbus, on the other, because Hitler was uniquely evil. He wasn't evil in the way everyone else at the time was evil. He was uniquely evil, and he didn't do anything particularly good, except, I mean, arguably helping out Germany's economy. But I don't really scale that to genocide.
We don't. But yeah, but sure.
But the point is that Columbus did something that was great for the world. I mean, you could argue at least that the West coming to America and creating America was a great thing for the world, just overall human prosperity wise. And I think that's the distinction between when we're talking about these different characters throughout history.
Well, to play devil's advocate again, no, like I'm not trying to be Hitler apologist, because you know.
No worries. You can no worries, Jolly B. I want you to respond, and then we're gonna go to these two new people who just hopped in. So go ahead, but I just want to let you know.
Yeah. Okay. This goes back to my earlier point about winners writing history. So, you know, maybe Nazi Germany could have turned into something, you know, comparable if Hitler got rid of his enemies. I mean, if you look at not the genocide of, say, the Native Americans that Columbus caused in the same way, but a lot of them died off, and now that they don't exist anymore, they're not part of our rubric of what is a great world that creative America has been for the rest of the world, or, you know, the West or whatever. But Germany just was a failed project. If Hitler got a hold of all his so-called enemies, quote unquote, and was the winner, and then the world looked the way the Nazis imagined the world to look, and that would have been a success story for all the people that were reading history, that now would have been pro-Nazi, I don't know, ideas, and because they were the losers, what they contributed to the world was not great, because they're on the other side of the fence. But if I'm talking about, if we're looking down the lineage of that ideology, if that succeeded and that was implemented across the globe, then yeah, who knows? Maybe Hitler would have been the guy that was seen as the good.
That is some very intense relativism. I see what you're saying, though. Like, the lack of a counterfactual makes it very difficult to really know either way. So I see what you're saying. I think it's a real argument, but
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, and then we'll go to the new guys.
Well, I think it's a bit of I think it lacks a lot of nuance. I think this view of right and wrong about historical fact. First of all, it doesn't really make sense when it's applied to historical fact, which was the argument that I was trying to make. Right, the guy got there first, and so the holiday has his name or something like that. Doesn't necessarily have anything to do with him. Of course it does, right? Because it has his name. But the larger fact, the larger point that I'm trying to make is that the view is not nuanced at all. Like, just the way you painted the narrative, right? We got there and there was a genocide of the local people. That's basically what history is, right? The history is just a bunch of confrontation between different peoples, and if you're gonna say that, how is that any different of saying that you don't like that you are who you are, or you don't like that you exist? Because, like, no one would have any moral grounds. No one would have any moral grounds to make any sort of stance over anything, because history, as a fact, is built on top of confrontation between people because of all sorts of reasons, right? because of religious reasons, mostly because of the need for resources as well, right? So I don't really think I don't really think at all that the moral scope has any valuable thing to say about history per se. It's just an effect of the modern times that we're living in, where the politicization of everything is the way to go. It doesn't make any sense to think of the historical past from our current political lens.
Yeah.
Well, I think for starters, like I would like to correct you on one thing though, that I don't think all cultures were equally privy to this. I mean, not even from the European context. If we look at the nation states, not all groups, not all tribes, not all peoples, if you want to call it that, were equally perceptible to imperialism. There's a handful of states that took on the conquest role and did the imperialism.
Don't you, Jolly? Don't you think it was the most powerful that did it, generally speaking?
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I was going to say. So if we're going to say how we can't judge the people like Columbus, because that genocide is okay, or the number of people dying in say the Americas or the Native Americans being basically invaded and killed in their own land. I mean, one can almost use the same metric. Like I was saying, I'll still stick to my my comparison with the Hitler concept, because the Jews were actually occupying an area where he was the democratically elected leader, and that was the general sentiment of the time, was that of anti-Semitism. So these ideas weren't like somehow unique. In fact, there's other places in the world which, I mean, if you go to the Middle East today and you talk to any country and any nation, the people would call Hitler bad purely because he didn't exterminate every single Jew. So these ideas they're not dead and they're not unique to that person. He succeeded in doing them, but we somehow can bypass the whole historical. Let's grant him some grace because he wasn't.
Nobody is trying to excuse Hitler. I mean, I've never met anybody that's trying to do that.
And no one's granting him. Yeah.
In the Middle East, they do. Bloody, from the perspective of anti-Semitism, they absolutely would support Hitler. In fact, the Palestinian League at the time was in talks with Hitler, the PLO, which was, the whatever that existed at the time. So,
let me just say that my response was that. Right, the problem is with politicalization. Is that the word?
Politicization.
Like making everything politicization. I'm sorry, I'm not an English speaker.
No worries, man.
I think that's the problem, and your answer is basically that, right? You're giving me a political answer. You're giving me a comparison to a recent political problem that happened in Europe. What I'm trying to say is that. Whatever people you look at whatever point in history you find them, you find that there are these confrontations, geographically speaking, no matter the magnitude, right? We call imperialism when it has to do with the word comes from empire, because it's like it's a bigger geographical place. So you have more people conquering more territory. But if you look at these specific places, what you find is just tribal warfare all the way through, and that makes total sense because life was really difficult. People had to fight for rivers. Like most of the wars in the Middle East go back to fights because of fucking water. They were fighting to control water, and that's what it mostly was back in those times. Like, I'm not saying that there wasn't a religious context to it as well, right? That the Spaniards, when they got to South America, they killed most people based on religious grounds. What I'm trying to say is that doesn't necessarily mean much when you look at the historical context, which can be devoid of personal context of these people. You don't need to be that worried about, like, the fact. There's a lot of facts. There's the internal narrative that goes on inside these people's minds that to our eyes is atrocious, right? The fact that the first time they look at the South Americans, they think these people are animals and we need to kill them because they're like pagans. Sure, everyone would agree with you that doesn't make any sense. Like in the same way, or most reasonable people would also agree that what Hitler defended didn't make any sense. Most people would agree with that. But that doesn't change the fact that all of these warfares existed at the scale that they can exist for every single people. You go to Africa, there's always been tribal warfare there. Always. It doesn't matter if there was Western interference or not.
Yeah.
You can make an argument that made it so that they didn't develop that as fast as they could or something like that. But the bottom line is that there's always been confrontation. There was confrontation between the Indians. There was always confrontation between the South American people as well. Like huge wars where they killed each other with fucking stone swords. Like it's just not a good argument. It's not nuanced enough. It doesn't.
Okay, guys, I really do like this discussion. I really do, and I want to let you respond, but I got to get to some of the new people. I have to spread the love of the mic. I think we'll come back. I guess the disagreement that I'm hearing there, and the prompt I want to bridge to the rest of the rest of the room, is basically, is the argument that, hey, if we're arguing that we should give people grace based on their historical setting, we can give anybody grace because people's environments determine who people are largely, and we shouldn't give everybody grace. And on the other side of that argument, and this is just what I heard, is no, because some people we have a reason to give grace because of their achievements, and some we don't. So just, again, we're talking about Columbus, and that's a more specific point I want to throw out there. Just Jim, you were here first, and then we'll go to Kapowski and the infamous Nivik after that. So give me your take on Columbus, his moral standing, the day, Indigenous Peoples Day. What do you think? Give me your hot takes.
Good evening. I don't know enough. I mean, I've heard good arguments from both sides that Columbus was good and bad. I don't know enough about it. I question some of the criticism. Not making judgment on it. I just don't know enough about it to make a decision on it. As far as having a day for it, I don't know. I mean, I work for a government agency, so I get the day off. I guess that's good, but I'm not sure if that's right. Yeah. So I don't have a whole lot to say. I'm just here to mostly listen. I just wish I had more data on some of the facts.
Sure.
Of, what happened back then, and then trying to compile that. I mean, I've read, like I said, I've read stories from both sides, and so it's hard for me to judge right now.
Sure, and I mean, I think that's a position I wish a lot more people had, instead of being hysterically angry one side or another. Like on around where I'm at, like you see signs about how he was a genocidal maniac, and then I see other people how he's like the first American hero. And I don't really think either of those positions are 100% correct. So I wish a lot of people believed more like you. But I guess my question to you would be, how do you feel about the day overall? Are you completely neutral, like in terms of feel? Because I know you don't might have the data, but just give me like your instinctual, emotion-based feeling about whether we should crucify this guy or not. I guess would be my only prompt to you. Or not if you feel uncomfortable and you don't want to get canceled. That's fair enough too.
I mean,
I don't want to pressure you.
If half of what I've heard is correct, then yeah, I agree. He should be held up. I mean, the thing I remember hearing is that I think it was after his first visit, he went back, and then the Queen of Spain said, don't bring us any slaves, and he went and brought more slaves. More people against their will, I guess, would be a better way to say it than slaves. I mean, if half of that stuff is true, yes, it's horrible, and so I just don't know. I'm kind of ignorant on this, so.
All right, fair enough, mate. If you want to pipe in at any point, just speak up, and I'll make sure to get you in queue. I think so. Thanks for speaking up, Kapowski. I don't know if I recognize you, so please give me your hot takes on Columbus and the current state of our view of the moral status of history. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, so I wish, I really wish I had watched this video about this subject. That I watched a few weeks ago. So Neil deGrasse Tyson had such a great take on this. I don't know if anybody saw that. He was on the Joe Rogan show. I don't know when, pretty recently. He's been on there a couple times, I think. And he went and he sort of went into this topic a little bit. And so I guess I don't really have a lot of deep insights about it. But, he was a product of his time. Slavery was a reality of that day and age. He made the trip for money. Someone was going to do it. The Queen of Spain or whoever wanted it to happen. Whether it's moral or not isn't really relevant to me in terms of how he was as a person, I should say. Celebrating the achievement is one thing. Celebrating the man is another thing. So those two things don't have to be one and the same.
Sure.
But I have to point out that, has anybody seen that with Neil deGrasse Tyson with Joe Rogan? Because you have to watch it, because there's this clip where he talks about how when Columbus came to the New World, it was the most incredible thing in the history of our species.
That's correct.
So,
I actually know what clip you're talking about. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, you're right. I know what you mean. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to let you know that I know what you're talking about.
Thanks for letting me give my input.
How do you feel about replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day? You think that's a good call? Do you think? What do you think about that?
Politically correct bullshit. No, it's not for me. I mean, it's just not necessary. The point is that he discovered the New World. We're not celebrating him. We're celebrating the discovery of the New World, the achievement of the combining of. We're celebrating the history of the event itself, not Indigenous people. Why should we? If you want to celebrate Indigenous people, great. Make another day for that. I have nothing wrong with celebrating Indigenous people. But that day is not about Indigenous people.
Yeah, and I think it's almost a disservice, because it's not really Indigenous Peoples Day as much as it is let's all hate on Columbus Day with like a bit of a name rebrand. So, I also think that it kind of takes away from like what, Indigenous Peoples Day could be.
Sure, very good point.
I think if you point out something great that an Indigenous person did, that's changed the world, then let's point that out and have a day for it. But giving someone a holiday just for the merits of them existing, like it's kind of like giving it's kind of like how they give everybody a first place trophy now, and that means first place trophies don't mean anything because everyone gets it,
Doolittle coming in with the hot takes. I was kind of wondering about that, if anyone was going to make that point. It's like, again, what did Native people do for the founding of America, or like to help out like the formation of America as we know it? And if they didn't do much, then is there a reason for America now to celebrate them? I think there's a good reason for respect, given our history. But in terms of actual celebration of deeds, I'm not particularly sure that's appropriate either.
Could I be the
please,
bearer of bad
yeah,
news again?
please, and then we'll go to Nivek. Sorry, bro.
I guess some people dying in the process of the founding of the Western modern day Western world might be worthy of recognition, at least, and maybe not as a celebration, obviously for their death, but they were actually somewhat involved in the process, because and I think founding of the Western world might be the actual point that we're making here, because I think America actually existed pre-Columbus. It's just it wasn't occupied by the group of people, and I think so it's an internal celebration. But if you want to look at the people that exist today, like I think this is where the whole heap of nuance comes in, is that their death actually was, the bunch of people had to die for this state to be founded, and then what happened post. We're sort of associating all the greatness that came post Columbus, I guess founding America, to Columbus himself. Like, if things pan out, like, you can say the British Empire did a lot of great things for, the world at large. I mean, English has been a language now that's become a global language, but to celebrate British Empire because of the Commonwealth being formed, therefore English being the global language that it is, and quasi responsible for the globalization process in America and all that sort of stuff. It's just a bit hazy to sort of go, well, yeah, okay, well, now we'll call the Queen of England or Elizabeth or whoever a hero, and let's celebrate her because she was quasi responsible for the Commonwealth being formed, and all the stuff that we've mentioned that Columbus is so and so forth responsible for. The trade routes being formed and America developing into the power that it is, and the Western world being changed forever because of that process happening. Well, okay.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair response.
Well, I was just gonna add.
How do you say your name, real quick? I'm sorry. What should I call you, just going forward?
G, just G. That's fine.
Okay, G. Great. Okay, very, very, very brief response, and then we'll go to Nivik.
Yeah, I think it would be quite silly if American people celebrated the Queen, since the Queen is not the Queen of America, it's the Queen of England. So I think it makes complete sense for British people to celebrate their Queen, and I think it makes perfect sense for American people to celebrate their American, people. Were calling them heroes on the chat. I wouldn't call Columbus a hero. I would call him a person who did something greater than him, right? Sure. All the other bad stuff, but that's part of America's history, not England's history, right?
Sure.
It's part of America's history.
Yeah,
it's not part. It's not part of the Indians.
I was bringing an example. I was giving an example. Like I'm just saying, the Queen of England is equally as responsible. We were talking about the great things that have happened globally, right? Like creation of trade routes, the Western powers coming into emergence. America's been a great player. England was a precursor to that. So I'm not saying that Americans should celebrate the Queen of England. I said global communities should somehow celebrate the conquest of the Queen, or or the royalty or the monarchy of England, because of them, the world has now the great language of English, and we have.
That's not.
None of us are arguing for a global Columbus holiday. I don't think there should be almost any global holiday. So I mean, I guess we agree on that point. Nivik. Sorry.
I have a quick point.
Quick.
Like a quick point, because Columbus never set foot in North America, so technically speaking, if us Americans, the only people that celebrate Columbus Day, want to celebrate someone, we should celebrate the first person to be on North America, not the first person to discover the Western Hemisphere.
I mean, I always understood. I mean, Leif Erikson, the Viking guy, got here, but he set up 2 towns and then he bailed, and the Vikings forgot about it. I think it's less about who placed their feet where, as much as it's about who discovered the new world in a way that was so meaningful that it brought the Western civilization to the Western Hemisphere. I think that's more what we're celebrating.
You can't say that we don't. Yeah, and you can't say we don't honor Amerigo Vespucci. The country and the continent is named after him.
Yeah. Unless I'm misunderstanding you, Daniel, and if so, you can clarify.
It wouldn't matter anyway, because he discovered the Western Hemisphere. I mean, what does it matter if he touched here or touched there? It's still an area, and like you said, it brought people over after word got out. Anyway.
I'll just say it one more time. He actually didn't discover the left hemisphere. A Portuguese ships had already been to Brazil on the south, but they just didn't make anything out of it.
Exactly. And what we're celebrating is the making. I feel
exactly. It's not really discovering it. But just to clarify my previous point, what I was trying to show is quite a silly argument. Is to make the argument that the Americans should celebrate Indians. That doesn't make any sense. You're not Indians, you're Americans. Why would you have to celebrate Indians? Doesn't make any sense.
No, we get it, G.
Well, some are both, right? I mean, there's plenty of Americans that are also Native American, right?
Right, and then they can celebrate that part of their culture, but having it be a national holiday is, I think,
No,
what
I'm
G
not
is
arguing about the
responding to.
holiday. I just want people to understand that, I mean, there are, you can be two things at once. You can be
Sure.
native ethnicity and American at the same time.
And I guess the nuance there is that if you're saying you got to celebrate Columbus, the people who have Native American blood are celebrating their death for the Western
Exactly.
world to be founded, which is the point.
Well, not really, because
didn't he land in Hispaniola? He landed in like Haiti,
Caribbean.
Dominican
It
Republic.
was Hispaniola, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
so-
actually that's actually fair. I mean, we're not making Native Americans celebrate anything.
As far as I see it, I am not my ancestors, and I have no emotional connection to them.
Fair enough. I mean, to be fair, yeah, that was like 500 years ago. So, like, that's also a fair point. Nivik, you got in for a second, but I kind of want to get your broader take on Columbus and Columbus Day. I have a feeling you'll have some stuff to say, so please hit us.
Yeah, no, I understand. I kind of see where Jolly's coming from. Like, people already been here, so what's the big deal with him? And I see where the lady's coming from, where she's saying, you can't, you could, just because you agree on some things, don't mean you agree on everything. You could separate the person from the accomplishment.
Yeah, and I think that's the question of whether we can do that. And I've always been of the opinion that I think you can separate one's personal moral character from their great deeds, and I think that's worth doing. We have a new person here who we haven't touched on yet, who is just L, I believe. I want to get you in here, see what you think, and if not, then we'll throw it back to the room. But please, Columbus Day, replacing it with Indigenous Peoples Day, that seems like it's actually going to be probably where the conversation is going to go. So give us your hot takes on the whole shebang.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to replace it because you'd be doing the same thing, but the other way around. I also don't think it's necessary to celebrate Columbus Day either. So because you've got a society, right, that is multicultural, and so you have, like Zemo pointed out, you've got Native Americans who are also Americans. There are two, you might say, identities there. And so if you say we're going to celebrate American identity, which is you might say the personification of Christopher Columbus, then you're saying to those who also have Native American identity that well, you're not saying anything in particular, but I think it won't be because you need the point of the celebration is to sort of bring up a sort of national consensus for a sort of unity. So if you're doing that with Columbus, what about those whom don't think Columbus is a hero but are part of the society? So either way, I think it's pointless. Perhaps you could say, I don't know, I don't think a celebration would be, if you're really trying to unify the society, people that inhabit the society.
What do you think about celebrating both, like Indians and,
Good luck. That's
and people, Indians of the past and Columbus as well. I mean, you like you say, it's not necessarily it's not about ends justify the means. Like, okay, it's good to rape, and massacre people. We like people aren't behaving like that from of the past, and the value of it was that it was learned. The negative factors were learned of it, and what not to do, and people now they more come to get under the commonality as Americans and as a secular society, well, kind of come together.
Celebrating both, perhaps, maybe, but you can't do that because they're really contradictory. You might say celebrations at the center of it all. So you really can't do that. It would be ideal to do that, but I don't think you can.
So this is a question I want to pose to the more pro Columbus side of the conversation, because this is actually an argument that I find pretty convincing. Is so this would be for Doolittle or Kapowski or Zemo or anyone who wants to take it up, or even G. What would you say to the argument that, like, look, if this is a national holiday, that means the federal government is saying that all citizens of the U.S. should be happy that Columbus arrived here and did what he did. but some of those American citizens had their ancestors brutally conquered by Columbus. I mean, what would you guys say to that particular argument? I mean, that's not really a holiday like Christmas or Thanksgiving that could theoretically be for everybody. So what would you guys say? What would you think about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, first off, I mean, I hate to break it, but Thanksgiving and Christmas, I mean, with the same moral sort of relativistic viewing, you could easily construe, Christmas,
Yeah.
you know, this is anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving, they slaughtered them. 4th of July, this isn't inclusive. I mean, this is, you know, I hate to be a slippery slope type of guy, but I mean, you know, this is kind of where we're heading with this type of stuff.
Yeah, I was wondering if that
You
was
know,
going to sneak by anybody.
and
And it was immediately caught, so good on you.
That's really what identity politics should be called. It should be called slippery slope politics, actually.
I personally don't see anything wrong with having both. I mean, me personally. I mean, we already have Juneteenth and July 4th, and
those aren't but those aren't contradictory. Those are no.
I mean, I guess people could make the contradictory claim, but you know, if people don't view it that way, that's fine. But I just want to pose the question real quick. Like I forget who was saying it earlier. I think G was saying it. Like how, you know, with these small tribal groups, you know, you see war between them, and you get bigger empires. You know, the Assyrians, etc. You see bigger wars, and then you get, you know, big powerful empires, and they're gonna go discover land. You know, just like a regular tribe would go and discover land, except they have more power, they have more influence, they're able to go across a continent. What do you expect is going to happen? I mean, if all of 2,000, you know, 5,000 years of human history says when two populations clash, they're gonna, you know, there's going to be a lot of war. You know, I just don't. I mean, I'm sure Christopher Columbus could have been nicer, but I mean, let's honestly be real. What do we expect? You know, what do we expect?
So the question goes: if people can go about interacting today, is there a way to interact in where you don't have to go the route of chopping people's heads off and, you know, raping and burning villages? Today, I mean, like, no, people. Well, I guess it kind of is done today.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of does breach into a bigger question.
What was the last 100-year period in human history without a war?
I can't name one off the top of my head, I'll tell you that. And this does get into it. The issue is, and so this is kind of the firecracker. I always thought of it as a firecracker question, but we'll see. What is Christopher Columbus actually morally worse than the natives were? And that's an interesting question to think about, because to me, it seems that both of them were all for violent conquest and enslavement, but one of them, it's just Columbus, first of all, he actually, like, when he did it, he actually, like, kept it instead of, like, fighting back and forth. I mean, Columbus did. Obviously, we're using the phrase Columbus. We're using all of this very loosely because, you know, exact places where people went. And he sparked Western civilization. The Native Americans never did anything like that for the thousands and thousands of years they were there. So it seems to me they both engaged in very horrific moral behavior, but out of one was born a great amount of prosperity, and out of the other, there wasn't, even though they had thousands of years to attempt to do so. So
yeah, but
that's a hell of an argument that I've heard.
They're more isolated compared to you have. You know, you have a lot of interaction of Europe with Asia, and you know, there's more to. That doesn't mean they're different as humans. You know, it's just that there's more factors over.
I mean,
people are more interacting.
Let me qualify my statement real quick, just so I don't get absolutely canceled. I am not saying that there's like inherent genetic differences between Native Americans and like Western people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying what history has shown us of what their cultures and civilizations have produced. And I think you're right. I think a big part of that is that the Native Americans didn't have the type of like beastly animals that the Europeans did. That put a bit of a cap on what they could do, but
can I also
the point still stands. I feel. Go ahead.
So if we're going to measure utility of an empire, so let's just bridge the gap that everyone is equally bad and equally good and all that sort of shit. So we're using utility and prosperity.
Nobody said that. Okay.
I'm saying if you want to grant that, let's say we grant that that's usually a liberal talking point, that everybody is equally good, equally bad, every culture is equally good, bad, whatever. Because I know the Australian Aborigines didn't do that, and there wasn't as much.
No, we're not saying no. Hold on, I want to be clear. Actually, we're not saying everyone's equally good and equally bad. We're actually saying that the natives specifically and Columbus's in the West's behavior when conquering the natives, those were equally bad, but we're saying that the benefits were not equally good. That's actually the point.
So who measures that is what I'm saying. So if I was to look at the Soviets, for example, pre the Bolsheviks, when you had when it was run by the monarchy, Russia was a pretty much economic shithole. Like it was like the territory that occupied all those states. The Bolsheviks brought them together, one of the number one economies ever. They were heading the space race with the Americans at the time. There was a bunch of technological advance. There were military power. So technically they had a lot of prosperity, but Stalin goes and kills 20 million people. It's like, bad guy. So what's the difference? So if you're measuring the prosperity of a people, you can clearly make the difference that even with the National Socialist in Germany, the German he was clearly better for the economy. He was clearly better for his own people from the perspective that we're measuring, the so-called progress of the Western world.
And the reason is because there's not equal badness. That's the point. Because the people before the Nazis and the Soviets weren't genociding people, and the people after the Nazis and Soviets sure as hell weren't genociding people. What we're saying, or what I'm saying, I can't speak for everyone, is that the evil is common in this context. The benefit is not. You're trying to make the same comparison between cultures who did not have equal evils. And that's why I think your comparison
would you
fails.
say the number of Native Americans dying in the colonization of America, are you saying by the numbers of people that died, or are you saying in what way was that different to?
No, I'm just saying the behavior. I'm just saying violent conquest and enslavement is violent conquest and enslavement. The only reason the numbers were massive is because smallpox and Western diseases killed off 90% of natives before anybody knew what was happening. Doolittle, you wanted to get in here, though, and I really don't want to take up the mic. So, what were you going to say?
I did? Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, you are now. Hey, you just got tapped. You just got voluntold. Yeah.
Yeah, there's more Native Americans now than there were when Columbus got here.
That's a thing. Okay, Jolly.
So,
I
don't know how that counts as genocide. So, if it was a genocide, then there would be less, probably.
There's more Jews today than there was during Nazi Germany. There's more Jews in the world today. So how was that a genocide?
Is it known that there are more native peoples here today than there were then, considering all of the mixed race?
There's 10 times. Yeah, there's 10 times as many.
You mean when you say
Native American
genome? What do you mean by that in terms of genetically? Do you mean genetically, that they are genetically of the exact same line and not mixed with other peoples?
Well, nobody's of the exact same line. I think that's a little bit of a straw man. But I know everybody's intermixed a little bit now, right?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, there is a difference between you're saying that their population increased, but it mixed with the fish population. You could say both populations increased to form, in the sense. So they're
to form sort of one population. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're not justifying genocide though, dude.
And also I was going to say the same thing with Germany. There's more Jews around today than there were pre-Holocaust. So the Holocaust.
I'm not so sure about that.
No, there is. There's double the number, in fact, today that there was at the time of.
And if the Holocaust hadn't happened, there'd be a whole lot more.
Exactly. And the same thing with the Native Americans.
Yeah, so I didn't say the Holocaust didn't happen. I'm just saying it wasn't exactly a genocide. And I'm not sure there's evidence.
What's the argument?
Attempted genocide either. People wrote books about giving Native Americans smallpox blankets, but this was before the germ theory of disease.
And that was way later.
I think
that was way late.
I think it's a little bit of a stretch to call it a genocide.
it's not a genocide. Like, no, definitionally, what Columbus
people
did
keep
was
throwing
not
this.
genocide.
People keep throwing this word around, and they're conflating Christopher Columbus with Hitler. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to not completely misuse words like genocide, where somebody's actually trying to exterminate a population
The word you're
with some
looking
sort of
for,
intention.
pogrom, not a genocide. That's the word you're looking for. It's a pogrom.
That's probably closer.
I know. I'm sure a lot of Native Americans died, and we certainly, in America at least, with Manifest Destiny, took over the land. But it's not the same thing as genocide. I don't think we should misuse that word.
I mean, I agree. That word gets thrown around a lot, and it's just technically not applicable, even though he did, like, kill a lot of people in his conquest, which was obviously horrible. It's just, technically speaking, that's not what it was. And this is something that happens a lot that I've noticed in our culture, is that we take the words that have the most, like, emotional weight that we possibly can, so genocide, racism, stuff like that, and we just try to apply them to everything we don't like just to show how much we don't like it, but in reality all it does is devalue the word, and it makes it semantically overloaded and garbage, and this is kind of a trend that I've noticed. What were you going to say, G?
It also for this, like, it also makes your argument seem stronger, right?
Right.
It has more sentimental impact or something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you want the emotional connotation without actually sticking to the actual definition of the word. I guess. I mean, actually, just Jim. Do you have any more thoughts, or are you still listening? Because I have something else to throw, but I wanted to hear from you again.
Yeah, I'm listening. I just wanted to add, like, I think you mentioned this a little bit, was, it's the unintended germ warfare. I mean, we could have taken over all of the Native Americans without firing a shot in anger, just through. I mean, there's some entire Native tribes that were taken out entirely by smallpox, because they've never come in contact with that, whereas the Europeans had. So I think we need to, like, what was the intention of it? And everything I've seen, and I haven't done a whole lot of research on this, is that, like, the Europeans didn't see the Native Americans as humans. They saw them as, quote, savages. And we had to educate their young in our own schools to bring them up in the ways, discipline them when they tried to speak in their own tongues. Again, I'm not an expert in this, so I may be speaking out of my ass here, but
no worries. That's kind of what we do around here. It's all right.
Like, I think it's a very good point, but
convert them to Christianity, right?
Yeah, that's a big thing, actually, that we haven't really touched on.
Well,
is that
if you don't have that, you're technically a savage.
I mean,
no, not at all. The word savage was used for groups of people who weren't civilized, in quote. So the Europeans never used the word savage to the Asians, the Chinese. I'm not making a case for it. I'm just trying to explain it.
Sure.
Because the Chinese were civilized way before the Europeans. So
that's
wait a minute. You're telling me yellow peril fear?
Huh?
With wasn't there yellow peril fear?
What is that?
Of well, it's anti-Asian sentiment.
There is
where they like it was about a fear. It was along race, culture, and religion.
Well, I don't want to move the conversation elsewhere, but I just wanted to explain that. All right.
I'm just saying.
Feel free to take the convo. Feel free. Wherever it takes.
All right. So I was just explaining. Someone said something about the use of the word savage as if you were not European, I think, and I was trying to explain. Christian, yes. And I was trying to explain it wasn't a word used to discriminate those who didn't practice the same religion. It was a word used to discriminate against those who weren't, quote unquote, seen as civilized, so who didn't have a running an organized political system, all these sorts of metrics used to characterize civilizations.
Can I say one thing? With the benefit of profit is enslaving instead of looking through the lens, instead of being seen as Christians. The view of savage would be justified as an economic motive. In enslaving
that's actually a very good point
for profit drive, and where with the Asians there was trade between it, so there that motive intention wasn't there, just along with blacks. There's no connection with Europeans and blacks, but you needed a fulfillment of people, for the slave trade, and so the villainization and the demonization and the justification was an economic drive.
Yeah. So you could actually bring that point.
Funny enough. Yeah, go. I'm sorry, but then if I can make a point, yeah.
Oh, you go first.
Yeah,
No,
G first, then Jollibee.
Okay, I was already going to make the point that I think that's just a symbol of the difference in civilization, right? That you would actually go to the length. I'm not being an apologist when I'm saying this. I think it's just a statement of fact. When your society needs to justify an act which was pretty normalized everywhere, which was to hold slaves, right? Every tribe had slaves of other tribes. Middle East, all over the Middle East, China had slaves. And I don't know, but I would bet that the Indians also enslaved other Indians from other tribes. It just goes to show how
it'd be justification.
Yeah, they needed a justification to actually do it because they're obviously more civilized in the sense that they have more rules and more, they had some sort of philosophy, which was in the form of religion. And
religion was used as a tool for justification for everything. So if you want to do this or you want to do that, you just say, well, hey,
our values are better.
And you can't argue against that. So
no, that's obviously not true, because there were clear boundaries that define a religion as being the religion that it is. If that was true, then everything would go, and that's not the case.
What do you mean by that?
Wait, what do you mean? Religion was argued both ways amongst everybody. Everybody used it in a way that seemed fit to them for justification.
I mean, and all that really means is that different groups of people had different, like, a priori, like, fundamental assumptions about morality and about how one should live, and they couldn't talk it out with words because they're fundamental. And like you're saying, you can't argue with religion. You can't argue with a priori axioms. So they just kind of went to war. That's what I thought about it.
Well, if you look at people as human beings, then it would be messed up to enslave them. But if they're just subhuman savage, then hey, we could bank on them.
Yeah, but the fact that you have to do that mental calculation is already a symbol that there's calculation happening, right? What I'm trying to say is that by contrast, every time someone makes a moral point about someone or something, or a calculation about how something is, it's always in comparison to something else. So when you're saying that it was wrong for them to enslave, and you're using this backwardly in the sense that the fact that there's a mental calculation, that's a symbol that there was more stuff being thought about, right? Other civilizations didn't have to make any mental calculation. It didn't fucking matter. It was normal to have slaves. So in this case, you need to justify it because there are some boundaries. And also, my point was more that saying that you can use religion to justify everything, and that it was in fact used to justify everything, doesn't make any sense. A religion has a backbone,
it's used as a tool. You could when you want to.
No, and any sort of set of rules is only a set of rules identifiable as the set of rules that it is if it works as a set of rules. You can't just say that, I used it to do anything. That doesn't work.
What you're not seeing today with how people are, like how the right argues religion, left is starting to pick up on that, and then they're using it as a tool back and saying, well, hey, wouldn't God want you to be for socialism?
No.
Wouldn't God want you to give? They're picking up on religion being used as a tool to, the ends justify the means. You're just going to use it to and that's that's what it is. That's how people do use it for. They'll use it. They'll interpret it in a way that just always conveniently helps them.
I agree with you that it is used sometimes like that. But what I don't agree is that the whole argument that you've made about this, you've used the words always and that's what it is and all of that stuff, and it's not. It's obviously not. I agree that there's individuals and there's sometimes systematic change of a point just because it's useful for some reason or
justification of enslaving blacks was used to religion backed by a profit driving motive.
I mean, partially, but also preachers came out and used the Bible to fight against slavery as well. Like,
exactly, my point. That's my point.
Well, there's obviously different interpretations. My point is just that it's not as relativistic as you're trying to paint it, right? There's obvious guidelines and rules on that thing, which I disagree with. By the way, I'm not a religious person. I'm just saying that
people interpret things differently, and they ward under different interpretations of in religious wars
of what was a fundamental value, basically. Yeah, again, like I think this is a pretty fair point. Is essentially people use their fundamental value structures and fundamental thoughts about morality and how the world should work and how people should live their lives. People appeal to that basically to justify taking over other people. They say, oh well, we can conquer this land because our values and our civilization is better, so we deserve it. And that's basically been the justification for everything ever, forever. Our values, our systems are better, so we deserve to keep that system growing and propagating. So I think Nivik's point is well taken.
Which is really needed in a world where everyone is doing the same thing, right? Any people that would not have that, any people that would not have a sense of tribe or a sense of people, of being a part of a people, would just be agglomerated by any other person or group of people that was next to them. I think a lot of the arguments against the motion, which is should Columbus Day be a thing that are being spoken in this discussion, are too naive not to see that.
Oh, hold on. No. That moderate. Hey, moderator time. Al, moderator time. G, I am sorry. You broke one of our very few rules. You cannot insult other people, and calling other people naive counts. I'm sorry.
No. I didn't.
Oh, did I miss something? Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say?
What I mean to say by naive is that it's not nuanced enough. You're simplifying things way too much, which again goes back to my initial argument, which is against using the political lens to analyze.
I get that. No, I get that. I'm just more concerned about. Hold on, G. Did you call them naive or did you call the argument naive? Because those are two different things. I felt like you called them, but I could have been wrong.
Calling someone naive is an insult, though. It's not an insult if you call someone naive.
But it is an attack on. No, hold on. If you call someone naive, that's an attack on the person, not the argument, and that's not allowed here. But I don't think you did. I could be wrong. I mean,
you can say that. You could say that.
Yeah, the record will prove whether I was right or wrong, whether you said argument or person, and you're not in trouble. Just going forward, just know that. You're not in trouble.
Yeah, it's fine. Bottom line, I don't know any of you. I would not guess anything about you personally. I'm only talking about what is being said. I'm not talking about any of you as individuals.
No worries, man. Understood. James B., you were in here for like a hot second earlier, and now you're back. But you didn't say anything. So please give us your hot take on the moral standing of Christopher Columbus, on whether the day should exist. Should it be replaced by Indigenous Peoples Day? How should we view history overall, morally speaking? James B., your turn at bat. Give us your hot takes.
Oh, hot takes. Yeah, so I had to back off and do some stuff, and then I guess what I'll say is this. Columbus did nothing wrong. He was a man of his time. Good luck finding anyone in history that meets your standards of what a perfect person is without some evidence. It's just good luck on that one. And then as far as his history, we'd be very careful with presentism.
which is imposing our values on the past, and then we also have to be very careful not. It's not the right word. We have to be very careful when interpreting the history within our current framework to understand its context and and take the lessons learned, right? Is where I probably would try and go with that.
I think
Can I say one thing? Why did you follow Nothing Wrong with Man of His Time?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I think I agree.
And then you said we learn from the past. Why? If you did nothing wrong, what's there to learn from?
That's a fair question.
Okay, so let me just put it bluntly. Christopher Columbus factually sailed in 1492, right?
The ocean blue.
He landed in the Caribbean or in the West Indies, however you wanted to break this out. Okay? Now, the facts, those are facts. He committed, he killed people. Okay? He sailed back and so on and so forth. Now, how we interpret those facts, that's the problem. That's the issue, Nevik. And this is in every form of discourse that we have outside of maybe science.
Maybe.
But typically speaking, when people bring in history, they are looking from a lens. You guys were talking about it just a few moments ago. A presentist lens and imposing their values on the past. That's what they're doing.
I agree with you in
Okay.
Learning from the past.
Okay.
Okay.
So you don't repeat it, right?
Yeah.
Well, the past doesn't repeat itself; it merely evolves.
It's
to say that is a reification of history, which is also inherently incorrect.
Because you can learn from bad things too, isn't it?
Yeah, you can learn from bad things. Absolutely.
I mean, I think I agree with basically.
And you can do things better as well. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Yeah,
no,
okay.
Don't worry about it. I think I basically agree with everything you said, James, except for like the very beginning where he did nothing wrong. That title was a bit of clickbait, not gonna lie, but
yeah, it's fine, and he was a man of his time. I mean,
but
his time.
Yeah, but nothing wrong is a bit far, but I agree with everything you said afterwards. I'm
okay. Well, I went with the clickbait title.
Yeah.
So
well,
I mean, from a factual perspective,
yes,
he committed a crime against other human beings.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I got you with the clickbait title. It was too successful. The title was too successful. What's that, L? And then we're gonna go to Bruce.
Yeah, I think you're not dealing with the problem. Like, the problem isn't what Christopher, well, it kind of is, but it really isn't. I think the main problem is you're trying to find something that unifies the society. That's what you're trying to find, right? It's not what Christopher Columbus did or what he didn't do or you're trying to say, all right, what is the best event that could sort of generate a national consciousness from every individual in the society? I think that should be the proper.
But that's an interpretation of the fact, which in and of itself creates issues, because the interpretation will change generation to generation, which is what we're running into now.
What do you mean, interpretation of what fact?
Christopher Columbus landing in the West Indies, and the significance of that fact.
I don't see the relevance.
That's an interpretation. So let me restate what I heard.
Yeah, I think you might need to clarify that, dude.
I get what he's saying. He's just saying like how could we go about things now in a unifying way as all, and taking things from the past and moving forward from that point on. It's not about the bad things that were done. That therefore justify it in where people, if you feel like chopping a guy's head off, you could chop a guy's head off, because at the end of the day,
all right. Well, let's let James make his own case, just real quick.
Okay.
James, try to clarify, and then we're gonna go to Bruce.
I appreciate that, and that's what I got from it as well. So TL, what I would sit here and say, just first maybe summarize your point, is we need there has to be some overarching narrative, and that seems to be the problem here. What I'm saying is, and I think I'm saying somewhat the same thing, but it's an historic, like when you're building your narrative, you cobble together facts. Okay, like a narrative is normally multiple things pulled together and to create that, and therefore is fundamentally interpretation of history. Lincoln interpreted history. Our founding fathers interpreted history for America. I mean, everywhere you look, you have people interpreting facts, omitting other facts, or choosing not to, for whatever reason. Like they're fundamentally pulling together a narrative, whether that is the overarching. Christopher Columbus was a great man because he was the one who went off on his own during this age of discovery. In the late 1400s to land in the West Indies, as it was called. Mm-hmm. That's that. Okay, that could be a narrative, right? Okay. That's a narrative, but it's still cobbled together with facts.
Hey, I understand the point, but you're missing the point. So that's the interpretation of the fact from, you might say, non-natives. Other natives don't see it that way. Don't you see the point? And they're also classified as Americans. And you're trying to... The point of Columbus Day, anyways, is some sort of national unity. It's to generate some sort of national unity. And if that's the purpose of it, and you're using an event that isn't construed, you might say, uniformly, then it's sort of a self-defeated thing, isn't it? And that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think you said point 4 times in that, but I guess I understand it.
I kind of see where he's coming from. There's a risk of validating negative things that were done in the past.
It's a very common, just to quickly finish up, it's a very common problem in Africa, which is there is no national unity in the countries, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have these polarization of groups. And if you're trying to generate, if you say this is a day for the nation, it's like it has to be, you might say, everyone has to sort of look at it and say, yes, this is what makes me American or what makes me X, whatever, right? And if they can't identify with that, I'm not saying you should then say we should put in a native indigenous day, because that doesn't solve the problem either. It just pushes the perspective to the other side. So I'm saying if you want to solve the problem, you have to sort of find a thing that puts people together and not...
Yeah, but you will never find that, as you even alluded to. I think we're talking the same thing, Tio. I don't think we're talking something different.
Fair enough.
But what is the purpose of Columbus? Because
sorry,
I didn't want to.
Sorry, no. Kapowski's turn is now. Go.
On your comment, I wanted to comment on your point that the purpose of Columbus Day was the unification of the country. I guess, are you saying that that's all holidays, I guess, are a unification in a sense of it's something that every single person in a country needs to relate to in some way? So, I mean, is that what your point is? And
that's not my point. I mean, that's not my point. It's a point I was playing devil's advocate with, and it's basically the idea that if you're gonna have like a federally, what's the word? Like verified, condoned holiday, then it should definitely be like theoretically a holiday that's not particularly divisive. Like, like Christmas has its Christian origins, obviously, and I mean that's back from the founding. We were a Christian nation, but like you don't need to be Christian to celebrate like Christmas because
the question is okay. Well,
but
then
Columbus Day is a bit different, right? For some people,
somebody was offended by it, or by some people were offended by it. At what point? Because as James pointed out, or was it James, or no, it was some guy that was gone now. I can't remember who it was. As somebody pointed out, everybody can complain and say they're offended by every other holiday too. I mean, not everybody. There are people who can claim to be offended or marginalized by various other holidays as well.
Yeah, but the ability to claim like divisiveness or offense doesn't necessarily mean that, like, just because there's like an equal possibility of people to do that doesn't mean that they're equally validated in doing so. If I want to, I mean, I actually agree with you. I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here. Bruce,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's true. I just think it's important to think about what is the reason that we have this holiday, and what is the reason that we have this. I mean, what is the purpose of this holiday? If it's not serving any purpose, then let's get rid of it.
That's an excellent question. Bruce, care to answer? What's the purpose of this holiday? Should we keep it?
What is that the question? What's the
Yeah.
question?
Columbus Day and Christopher Columbus. I want to know what you think about Columbus morally. I want to know whether you think Columbus Day should stick around, whether we should replace it with Indigenous Peoples Day or something else. I want to know how you think we should view history overall, morally speaking. Give me your thoughts. The clickbait was the clickbait title was Christopher Columbus does nothing wrong ? Exclamation mark. So.
Well, I mean, by what standard?
Yeah.
So that would be my first question.
Is that not the question?
I would say
No, it's intentionally vague.
Person,
that way we can argue over it.
Yeah. Every person has done something wrong, so that's an easy one.
Yeah.
And for all men have fallen short. But like, was he wrong for what? I mean, participating in colonization? I don't think he did that. He was in discovery, barbaric in some practices, probably, but not any more barbaric than those to where he landed necessarily. As far as its observance, I think it really became a national holiday sometime in the 70s. It was, it's a unification effort. We had a lot of patriotic sort of efforts years ago to try and get people under some sort of, cool reason to celebrate. It's driven by marketing and consumerism, mostly. So I think that's the reason why. It was like, there are Italians that love Columbus. They celebrate him, in the Northeast every year. That's a big reason why. I don't know. I think changing it to Indigenous Peoples Day, it's just sort of I always find that to be interesting. Like, Columbus Day is very specific. Indigenous Peoples Day just sounds like a booby prize, or just like, hey, we'll give you a day, here you go. It's like, what is indigenous, and by what date or time are we referencing the indigenous peoples? It's a silly sort of amalgam of, wokeism, at least as far as I could say it. But Columbus himself, like, somebody has to be given credit for landing on a specific place at a specific time first across the ocean.
And
if that's the only fact that we have at this point, like, I think it's a fair accomplishment in the same way that somebody might celebrate, Neil Armstrong. Maybe we should have a Neil Armstrong Day. That would be cool.
That's what I was going to say, Bruce. I was going to say, if we're going to replace Columbus Day, like, it's sort of the spirit of pioneering, right? Is what it represents.
I mean,
so replace it with somebody that has something equally great but modern. Yeah.
I mean, would you say, like, let's say in Spain or in Italy, would they celebrate Columbus Day there? Like, the fact that one of their nation's peoples went to the far off United States or North America first or earliest for them. I mean, that would be a big accomplishment back then. Maybe it should have been carried forward. Like, had Columbus not done what he did, or any other explorer at the time, and traveled across the Atlantic and the Pacific, depending on which explorer you're talking about, would they have been, so far along as they are today? Or maybe it would have taken longer, but you give some sort of credit to the pioneers or to people that had tried hard. And I think that's kind of what that is. And we benefit in the same way that, the Italians benefit in that scenario. People have discovered a land, and we've continued to migrate around the globe. I think it's all very valid.
Yeah, I always thought that this day could be replaced just instead of Columbus Day, like something like Discovery Day or something similar. That's less about the person and more about, like, just the general opening up of the Western Hemisphere. So something in that vein, 100%. What does the rest of the room think about that idea? Zemo, you just got back, or just Jim? Do you have any thoughts?
I like
think...
what El.
Sorry, Nivik and then G. Nivik first.
I like what El is saying, and where it's about how you go about it, and it being more inclusive, and I guess it could be interpreted in a way where, like, some people would have this might makes right mindset of conquer and destruction and massacring is a valid thing.
Why is Columbus Why is Columbus somehow associated with massacring individuals and not others? That's not the celebration at all.
Hey,
Yeah.
Bruce,
Say
I'm agreeing with you, Bruce. You know, it's like it's how you want to go
Yeah,
about
but Bruce, this
doing.
is the
It's
thing,
how you
right?
want to go about doing it. You know, some people some people have different mindsets in the
Yeah,
country.
they do. And
Some people have a mindset
unfortunately-
of people should be
Yeah,
enslaved
sure.
and they should be oppressed. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
that-
And it's
Who
about
says
how
that?
you go about.
Who's saying that during Columbus Day we should celebrate oppression? Who's saying that?
Nobody's saying that, Bruce, but
It's not happening at all.
But this is the thing.
You
right?
have some people that do
Nobody-
talk
you don't
like
have
that.
to say
There are
that
some people that
explicitly.
No, it is.
believe that
It
they
is.
turn
It is
into a
happening.
mushroom.
They're
One at a time.
Come on.
One at a time. Brewster, Doolittle.
People-
Play rock paper scissors.
Can I say something? Like,
No, I was
I'm
just saying,
gonna
like the
say-
idea that some people do something isn't necessarily a reason.
Okay, Al and then Doolittle.
Nobody's saying that. Well, perhaps there are people saying that. Odd. I think if I was to play devil's advocate, I would say, if you celebrate Columbus Day, right, and I was a native, right, the first thing that would pop up at least is how was America founded? Perhaps, you know, besides the traversing of the oceans and whatnot. You'd have to include subjugation and pogroms and all that sort of stuff, right?
No, wait a second. Why would you have to do that?
Why would you have to?
Yeah, why
You
would you
can't.
have to have the founding of a nation somehow
Yes, okay,
associated
fair enough.
with a delineated piece of time and
Fair
some
enough.
date that you've chosen
Fair
around
enough.
subjugation? That hasn't been the case since 0 BC.
Fair enough. Okay. So it's a necessary, you might say, implicit, you might say, consideration that America was founded with some sort of program, right? It's a necessary, it is a necessary implication. You can't have the founding of America without some sort of program, Bruce. Right?
Well, it would depend upon what you're talking about. I mean, what are we talking about? The founding of America? Are we talking about our battle against England? Are we talking about the earliest time of Puritans? Columbus specifically. What specifically?
Okay.
Because I mean, that's really broad, you know. Because that's what I'm saying. These sorts of things are really broad.
It is really broad, to be quite honest with you, and this is an oversimplification. But at least from my little knowledge of history, I would say, through, you know, because I think he was searching for gold or El Dorado or the city of gold or something like that. I think it was Francisco Pizarro, one of those guys, but something
Cortez.
similar.
Cortez also, yes.
I would say, and you know, he had to go through, you know, like tribes and, you know, massacres or whatever. I don't know how much. You know, there was also some parts of the population that was killed off by diseases and whatnot. But the point is, the steps, or you might say, the steps to which the generation of the state or the nation America was founded upon went through these processes. Though you could say, well, at what time? That's where we get to the oversimplification problem. But I think it's a reasonable consideration, anyways. But,
So what would you do, Al? What do you think should be done?
what would I do? It's a difficult thing, really. I wouldn't like get rid of Columbus Day, honestly. I don't know.
Would you replace it, or would you just be done?
I would rename it to Amerigo Vespucci Day and then have everyone complain about that for the next 100 years.
I don't know. I would
keep them on rotation.
I'd definitely still leave in the history books.
No one's complaining. It's just about
Everyone likes to shit on white people, but they never distinguish between whites and Italians.
Hold on.
Everyone likes to talk about white people all the time, but they forget that these people were Italian. They weren't white.
I mean,
This
yeah.
isn't
There's
why
a great deal of
white
lumping.
folks killed each other off of different views too.
Yeah. The idea of indigenous peoples and oppression and slave trade and white people being the problem from wokeism is only conveniently applied to these people as opposed to the Italians.
The
that are
right
actually
is
not white.
dividing along whites who killed each other.
Columbus was
in
Italian. He
saying-
came with
in- in-
Spaniards.
No, I think this is a completely different conversation.
The right is
No, it's
dividing
well
along.
related.
Hold on, one at a
The point is
time.
it's conveniently
Killed each
applied.
other.
The point is it's conveniently applied as subjugation, racism, slave trade, or otherwise when it fits the narrative.
I mean,
No,
I tend
no,
to
the right
agree.
always talks about Western values.
What are you talking
Of
about?
people who
The idea
killed
that
each other,
indigenous
who
people
had
did
Let
something
Nivek
to
talk,
many
Bruce.
people of Europe killed each other. You know,
No,
people.
no one mentioned
Everybody.
that.
But I'm talking about people are dividing along race and
Right.
what do you call it? The region, the of Europe are people on the right.
No, I think
think-
Bruce agrees with you.
What?
Basically, I think that both of your points is that hey, people have been killing each other forever for lots of different reasons. Bruce is saying it doesn't just apply to white people; it applies to everybody, especially Native people.
Al is
who
talking
were-
about
and Nivek.
bringing Indians, bringing other people into the mix in feeling included in the celebration of Columbus is where L's coming from.
Yeah, I know, and Bruce
He doesn't
interrupted you, Al.
their,
So
their view of Columbus would be different in his celebration.
Because the idea of Columbus is essentially, at least the primary idea is, this is where America started somewhat. So this is what makes us American. So if you're trying to
came to America.
That's true.
we'll get to you in a second, man.
Yes, we know, like there's Amerigo Vespucci and Francisco. But yes, we like that's. But we're trying to focus on the point. And, at least the possible reason why, Columbus Day is a day. At least this is my theory. It's like we're trying to celebrate, where America, started theoretically, or and hence why we are American. And the problem we're running into, and
Indians contributed to America too.
It predates America by like 300 years, 200 years.
Yes. Well, but that's not really the point right now. So if that's the case,
Well, I mean, the more important part is that Columbus. Yeah, I mean, he came with people who raided and pillaged the, around the Caribbean.
Who said they raped? Who said they raped and pillaged? Like
I said raided, but if I would have said rape, that would not be false either. Genocide.
No.
Let's put it that way. That's more accurate. Genocide.
I don't know if it is accurate actually. Like I've read history books written from the written accounts of the people that went not Columbus and his people, but I read the Spaniard invasions of South America, and I also read the African invasions of Portuguese people. And I know for a fact that the invasions of Portuguese people were completely diplomatic, so they only resorted to violence when the people they were invading completely opposed to them. So they would actually always prefer to do diplomacy first.
And there's like the Portuguese versus Spaniards, but that's false as well.
No, what I'm.
I think we're getting a bit off topic here, boys. Unfortunately, last point, G, and then I want to ask one more question to end it off. So just be quick.
Okay, sure. So I was gonna say that maybe it's relevant to state that President Roosevelt did make the Columbus Day a federal holiday to honor Italian American culture and the arrival to the New World, right? So we keep saying I have a theory about why the day is there. Well, we know why the day is there, right? It's an historical fact. The president decided that the thing was going to be there, and it was supported by a large community of a specific church. No, it was a church. I can't find.
It was the Catholics, I think.
No, you're talking about the Italians at the Knights of Columbus Catholic Church religion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
All right. This has been great, but unfortunately, my time is running short. So, as I generally like to do at the end of these conversations, I like to ask one question and just rapid fire it. And I kind of already asked it to Al, but I figured I'd do this today as well. Is what do you think we should do about Columbus Day? And I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys are going to have very short answers. Try to keep them brief, and then I'll say something and then we'll end off. This has been a great conversation, and we'll talk about it later. But Bruce, what do you think we should do about Columbus Day, if anything?
Well, I think it's already been done. It's now Indigenous Peoples Day, but I would say we continue to recognize it if we wish to celebrate a quality piece of history by Italian Americans.
Great. Doolittle.
Yeah, I think, rename it if we must, but rename it after somebody that's a great explorer or pioneer who's done something great. Please avoid worshiping victims and losers of history.
Okay, I'll take the take. James B, what do you think we should do?
Just leave it alone.
Fair enough,
Teach people
mate.
actual history and just understand there are competing facts with everything, and how history is debated is
Fair enough.
Conversation.
Kapowski.
Yeah, I don't have a really strong preference as to whether we keep it or toss it. I just want to make sure that if we do toss it, we toss it for the right reasons. And I don't want to toss it just because there are people who feel like it's personally offensive to them in some way, because like I said before, I don't think that we should capitulate. Well, I didn't say this exactly, but I don't think we should capitulate to this way of thinking that we should feel emotionally attached to our ancestors.
Yeah.
And if we get rid of the holiday, I'm fine with that. If there can be if it's not really serving a strong purpose, because I don't know if I think that it does, and maybe we'd be better off celebrating something else.
Yeah. Like Doolittle. Yeah.
And that's about it.
I think that's I like the take. I like it. Nivik, give me your thoughts.
Learn the good, the bad, and the ugly of the past, in order to have an idea of a better future.
I'm sorry, say that one more time, Nivik.
Learn the good, the bad, and the ugly of the past, and in order to have an idea in how to go about making a better future.
All right, fair enough. Trav, I know your throat's I know you're a bit sick, so I'll skip you for now. But if you want to give a rapid fire take, feel free to break in. Pax, I know you haven't been in here very long, but what do you think we should do about Columbus Day?
James and Nivik said, like, okay, yeah, if we're gonna maintain that holiday, let's talk about the real history behind Columbus, like the good and the bad. But I think if we do that, Columbus is probably not going to be, worshipped or hailed as a great explorer anymore. He came to the Americas, to the Caribbean specifically by accident to begin with, and when he did get here, he and his man. They came to the Americas and back to Europe and back to the Americas a couple times, and they genocided millions of fucking native people.
Well, not technically genocide, but yeah.
That's no, technically genocide, because they mass slaughtered millions.
All right. Well, we had this argument earlier, so I invite you to go back and watch the recording of this and see if you still hold your opinion. Because, but you think we should get rid of the holiday? Basically, is that what I'm hearing from you?
No, I didn't say we should get rid of the holiday, but if we're going to teach real history, let's, be straightforward. Columbus came here, by luck. He set out to explore, and he came to the Americas by accident. That's not where he was headed to. And along the way, like, he and his man, literally slaughtered millions of indigenous people.
Yep, we got it. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Pax. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. It's just we're doing rapid fire here. And so that's not me trying to be a jerk. Zemo, what do you think? What should we do?
Yeah, you can today. As far as I'm concerned, you could add a Indigenous Peoples Day. That's cool with me too. Know the history, and at the end of the day, we're celebrating the deed, not the man. And yeah, that's it for me.
Al, final thoughts. What should we do about the day?
My attempts to keep both sides unified, I would say it's ideal, but probably won't work. You can have Columbus Day, definitely. It's an important bit of history, but at the same time, you could have something like recognition, something like that, for those who went through whatever the hell we think they went through. And so you could have both, like a World War sort of thing where you recognize the war and then those soldiers who fought, but this isn't really like that because these guys didn't really fight. Well, they did, but you get the point. So yeah, I guess that'd be like the most ideal situation for me, but I think the day is important because it's an important bit of history.
Fair enough. All right, G.
Well, I agree with teaching the good and the bad. I think that should go on. Yeah, like that should be obvious. But I'd emphasize teaching actually a more nuanced historical account. So, like, I feel like often people don't say that history is full of gaps and uncertainties, and we never know for sure how things went down and why people did the things that they did, the way they did, etc. Don't change history because it fits some historical narrative which serves a political narrative better. I think that's insane. But there's lots of good reasons also to just reform holidays in general. For example, the fact that there's great people all around that contribute and did contribute to better presents and futures. So I don't know. I think there's good reasons for both.
All right.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
that's it.
Okay. So that's all I have. That's all the time I have. Thank you guys for coming. This was a great conversation. Some points got brought up that I hadn't really thought of before. For anybody watching on YouTube, go check the description. All the links are here if you want to be involved in conversations like this one. Free and fair conversation is rare in today's world, especially on the internet. So I invite you to come on down and join us. So thank you everybody for coming. Really enjoyed it. Move over to the tab if you want to keep this little rumble going, but that's all I got for me. So thank you everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, John.
Nice to meet you too.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
And everyone else. Nice to meet you all. Thanks.
See you, G.